Okay, so this is a little intro. Today's video is going to be a little bit different than usual. You're going to get to watch me have a conversation with one of my really good friends, Nicole Adair, who is also an author. She wrote A Tangle of Dreams with part 2, A Memory Made Real, and she wrote Voted Most Likely. I've read all 3 of these books. I absolutely love all 3 of these books. And so I reached out and was like, hey, do you mind being interviewed by me? We're just going to chat about different authory things. I've got a list of questions I'm going to ask her. And so that's what you get to watch today. So enjoy. There we go. There we go. There we go. Computer lady, recording in progress. You look so cute.
Oh, thank you.
I'm all pixelated because my computer's real old.
Okay. Well, I thought I had Zoom downloaded, but then I think I had to delete it because we have like no storage on our computer. It's just like anytime we run anything, it's like you're out of storage. I'm like, what are we storing? We're not even storing anything on this computer.
There's nothing in here. I've already got hard drives that I just plug in when I need it.
Oh, it's the worst. So anyway, I had to re-download it. So
I checked it like an hour before. Like when you sent me the text, I was like, oh yeah, we're doing that today. I need to like probably had to update that. I was like, you have, version 4.0 and it's version 5.9 now. I'm like, oh yeah, let's go ahead and do all the updates.
I have literally never had a Zoom call and been like, yeah, everything went fine the first time I got on. like ever in my life.
The Zoom motto is like, oh, if you want everything to go smoothly, don't use us. Use someone else.
But for real though. How are you?
Good. It's bananas, but it's good.
Yeah, have you recovered and caught up on sleep?
I don't know if that's a thing. Like does that ever happen?
That was a trick question.
Like, well, my kids still live here, so I don't think that will happen. And then they'll move out, and then I'll worry about them all night, and so I still won't. It is what it is.
And then we die. So
and then we die. Yeah. And then we die, and then we don't have to worry anymore.
That sounds great.
Okay. So unfortunately, I'm a cheapo, and I've got the free Zoom. So we've got like 40 minutes. I was gonna start a timer, and I forgot. So we're gonna do that.
Waiting 40 minutes. Okay.
Real quick.
I'm like, I don't even know that there's versions that you pay for. So
yeah. That's why Jody Moore can afford to do hour-long coaching sessions because she makes the big bucks. And I'm like, yeah, we're gonna use a free version over here.
Yeah, free version forever. Free version all the way.
I'm gonna go with frugal and not cheap, right? Because there's a difference.
Oh, yes.
Okay, so what is the most
first critical? I have to say that I also finished your book.
Really?
So good. Yes. I finally had time to read it, and I was like on my phone, like, everyone leave me alone while I was trying to read it. So it was so good.
Oh, good.
I'm ready for book 2.
That's what I just sent book 2 out to beta readers before I left for England. And exciting. I was getting messages when I was in England. One of my friends finished it, and she's like, when do I get book 3? I'm like, girl, talk to me next year after book 2 is out, and then I will talk to you about book 3.
Yeah, well, that's the problem when you're writing a fun, good series, is that it's like, okay, give me the next one. It's like,
the next one?
It's so simple.
I know. I'm a little stressed because book 2 will come out next year, and book 3 will come out the year after that, which is fine because both of those are like written. They're not done. There's a lot of editing that needs to happen, but they're written. Book 4, I have like 16 chapters written, and I have the rest of it plotted. Book 5, I've got like a scene here and a scene there and like nothing written. So I'm like, it's fine. It's fine.
You'll get there when you need to.
It took me 14 years just to write the first book, but sure, I could do it.
But now you're in like that, you have that momentum now,
That's
like
true.
and you have like deadlines
and expectations.
Which I feel like helps. It helps with the like, oh, I need to figure this out.
Yeah. Now. I need to zero it in. I can't just sit here and like, well, I'll figure it out next week. Like,
yeah, exactly.
Like, now you kind of got to like right now.
No, time is now.
Time is now.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go ahead and do these questions then.
Okay.
I had fun looking these up, and like I basically went through. I have like a whole list of questions, and I was like, these ones sound like the most fun. So let's do it.
Well, I hope I have fun answers.
As my kids people will tell me like, Donica, I have a question for you. I'm like, I may or may not have an answer.
I like looked through your questions and I was like, okay, I think I have answers for all this, but I like didn't write them down or anything. So here we go.
Here we go. So what's the most surprising thing you've learned while writing your books?
So do you mean like something I've learned like internally for myself or like research wise while I'm writing, like something
I'm
I
going to
like
give you the
learned?
obnoxious answer of either one.
Either one. Well, I'm like, I don't have anything. For researching in my books, most of it is just all made up stuff. So I don't
Yeah.
really have to do research. But for voted most likely, I did have to like do a lot of research for the debate rules
Oh, yeah.
because with the first time I wrote it, it was extremely incorrect. And I was like, none of this is right. Like, I was like, shoot, this whole thing doesn't work because I didn't do any of the like when they speak, I knew none of it because I didn't do debate. So I was like watching YouTube videos of like the national debate competitions being like, who's talking? When are they talking? When can they respond? And it was just really funny. And like, also no one cares about this except for me. So, and I'm like, did I even get this right? I still don't know. So that was like research wise, one of the only times I've had to like dig in and like be
Yeah.
accurate about something. But as for, I feel like every time I write, I sit down and I like learn something about myself. Every time I
Yeah.
write, it's like, I don't know. I feel like if you want some like self development and if you want to like get to know yourself better, you should be forced to write a book. I feel like that's like,
Absolutely.
who am
Absolutely.
I every time I sit down to write, you know?
Yeah. Oh, it turns out I'm a big procrastinator. That's who I actually am.
Yes, you learn a lot of things about like work ethic, you know, motivation. You learn about, I don't know. It's
I
every
never want to
time.
wash the dishes more than when I have a hard scene to write.
It's very true. Suddenly I'm interested in like the dust on my baseboards. I'm like cleaning out vents and I'm like, you literally never look at any of this until
Let me
you're
color code and alphabetize our entire DVD collection.
Mhm. It's always ridiculous.
Um, yes. Yep. I think research wise, I learn all kinds of weird stuff because I'm like, oh, I want to use this kind of surfboard. Wait, was that around in 2008? I literally,
Uh-huh.
one of the surfboards I talk about in book one, I actually emailed the company and was like, hey, I have looked all over the internet and I cannot find any information about when you guys actually started making surfboards. This is really kind of dumb, but I'm an author and I want to reference one of your boards in my book and I want to make sure that the timeline adds up. What boards did you have available at this, in this year? And they're like, oh, that's super cool. And like they emailed me back and it was really nice. I was
That
like,
is
cool.
super
No
cool.
one will care about that. No, like Bethany Hamilton could read my book and probably would not actually like, oh, wait a minute. That
But
board
that's
wasn't around.
cool. That's way cooler than me like analyzing YouTube videos of the
Well, I've done
national
that
speech
too.
competition. Where I'm like, even right? And also like, does anyone care? And the only other thing I feel like I Google all the time is like different ways to roll your eyes, you know, like that. And so like
Like,
how many
how come the
times can I
thesaurus
like
doesn't have more words for smiling?
I know. So it's always just like a synonym for like anytime I
Yes.
Google something, it puts like synonym at the end because they're just like, I'm assuming that's what you
You
need. And I'm
probably
like,
want a
you're not
synonym for
wrong.
this, right?
Yeah, you're
Yes.
not wrong.
Yeah, there's so many chapters I've written like brought to you by grinning because everybody's grinning at everybody.
Everybody's grinning, everyone's rolling their eyes. I feel like
Yes.
if you're writing teenagers, they're all like slouching and you know, I'm
Eye
just like,
rolling. There's a lot of resisting the urge to roll eyes in my books.
yes, yes. But yeah, I'm like every time I'm drafting, I'm like, whatever, you're all rolling your eyes and
Yeah,
I'll figure
everybody's
this out
rolling their eyes.
later.
It's fine. We'll deal with it in another draft.
Yes.
So, do you find that writing exhausts you more or energizes you more?
I think the easy answer is that it energizes me, but also it's extremely exhausting. So I feel like while I'm doing it, and if I'm like in the zone, it's like the best feeling. Like you're just on fire, time is flying, and you're just like, oh,
Oh, it's
this
three
feels so
o'clock in the
good.
morning. I didn't even notice.
Yes, and
Let's
that's the
keep going.
problem is I've got like so caught up in like the creative like process that I'll just like be writing, and then afterward I feel like it hits you all at once and you're like, "Oh, I'm so tired." Like I
Yeah.
was actually really surprised by how tired I felt while working on my first 3 books because you're like, Okay." I mean, I also wasn't getting enough sleep. There was that. But
Yeah.
even when I would get enough sleep, I'd be like, why am I so tired like all the time? And I feel like it's because my brain just literally never shuts off. Like you're
Yeah.
constantly like like exercising is like
It's
how it feels.
it's like the opposite of having a newborn, right? Like
Yes.
brain stuff while having a newborn like is not complicated, but it's all the physical, never sleeping, always nursing, always like there's always something to be doing that you just feel exhausted. I feel like writing is the opposite where it's like my brain never stops even though physically I don't actually feel tired. I am exhausted.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's so confusing, but it's like that I'd finish writing and then I'd like lay in bed and I'm like still typing stuff on my phone. And I'm like, no, go to sleep. And I'm like, no, I have more. And I'd be like,
But if I
hunched
miss this,
over, like,
I'm not going to remember this in the morning.
no, I'm like, I gotta write this down, or like I'm falling asleep and I'm like, wait, I have an idea. So it's like it's exhausting, but because it makes me happy and I feel like it's something that utilizes my talents and things like that. Like it does energize me and I
Yeah.
feel so like enriched by it, but
Yeah.
I guess enrichment doesn't always translate into feeling energized.
Yeah.
I'm like
Yeah,
I'm
it's
feeling good
fulfilling
but tired.
and exhausting.
Yes, totally.
Yeah. I feel like it also depends for me if I'm like where I am in the writing process. If I'm drafting, I feel like writing is way more energizing. Like I can go, go, go and like what's a
Hmm.
clock? Let that sun do its thing around the universe. Like I can just sit here all day and just do it. But if I'm editing, I feel like it's way more exhausting and like, okay, I worked on a page for 30 minutes and I need to go take like an 8-hour nap because like,
I
oh my
know.
gosh, that was intense, you know?
It's so funny though, but I feel like you are you're a better drafter because we shouldn't be comparing, but I
Yeah.
feel like you you probably enjoy drafting more than I do. I think as I've come because people ask me all the time which stage of the writing process I like better, and I
Yeah.
like the freedom in drafting and like the
Yes.
fact that you don't have to fix anything, but I think my brain really likes already having something there, and
And being
like
able to
I
just
feel
tweak things.
yes, like, so I
Yeah.
think the revising process for me, like drafting, I feel like is more emotionally exhausting for me.
Yeah,
Like
I
I
can
am
see
like,
that.
it's so, I think I have a harder, I don't know, I guess I don't trust the process as much. Like I'm like, oh, I just feel like I'm not getting anywhere sometimes. And I think maybe that's just where I'm at right now because my drafting process currently is I'm just like, what's even happening?
Yeah.
And I don't get to see that like that progress in the sense of like, you've seen when I put all you do sticky notes too. I'm looking at
Yeah.
them right now.
Yeah.
When I'm like checking stuff off, my brain is like, yay, like it
Yeah.
really likes that. So I'm like energized by getting things done when I'm
Yeah. Like
revising. And the drafting is just like, whoa, what's happening? Like,
and
is it something?
I find it's my brain is the opposite because I feel like
Hmm.
with the drafting, I can be like, wow, I did like 3,000 words today. That's amazing. Whereas with editing, I'm like, my word count's like 2. But
Yeah.
I've been working for 3 hours, you know?
Yes.
Or
And
it'll be
it's
negative words
like,
because I usually have a tendency to overwrite and I have to cut a bunch of
that's so
stuff out.
true. I
And
do
so,
that. I do that too. And it just depends on the day, how much sleep I got, how
yeah.
my kids are behaving, if I'm well fed, if all the conditions are right. Like
Am I
I could
surviving
draft
off of Diet
forever.
Coke or have I eaten real food today?
Yes. So it all depends on where I'm at, but I truly enjoy both processes.
Yeah.
But I'm also like it's just interesting to think like which one does energize me more. And I feel like I always And in whatever stage I'm in, I'm like, no, I want to be drafting when I'm revising. And when I'm revising, when I'm drafting, I want to be revising. So it's like, oh, I can't ever be happy. So.
My OB told me one time the easiest pregnancy is the one you already did. And
It's the truth.
I feel like that's true in writing too. Like the
Yes.
easiest book that I've ever done is the one that's already done, right? Like the
You
one
look
that's
back,
the
you're like,
hardest
oh,
is the one
that
I'm
wasn't
working
that
on right
bad.
now. I wasn't,
Yes,
yeah.
it's the
Oh,
truth.
that's why we keep writing books.
That's
We forget the crying over commas and trying to figure out whether or not to use a semicolon.
It's it is so true. It is so true.
So, what would you say are common traps for aspiring writers?
I would say this is just for sure my experience. I consider myself still an aspiring
Yeah, I was
writer.
like, I feel
Is
like a
that
poser asking this question, like, oh,
no,
aspiring writers, because I have a whole one book out.
no, but I feel like we're always aspiring to write. And I feel like the common trap I fall into most often is that everything needs to sound good every time I write.
Yeah,
And that's just could not be more of a lie. It is not true in any way. Like because we read finished books and you're just
yeah,
like, oh my gosh, they're so good at writing.
yeah,
And it's like, yeah, because they wrote a lot of bad sentences to get there.
yeah,
But every time I'm writing and I'm like, oh, I hate this. It sounds so bad. And I don't know what I'm doing. Like, it's that mental game of like letting that go to write something that turns out really good. But
yeah.
I feel like I see that happening a lot where people like expect it to sound good. And I'm like, I feel you. I do that same thing too. It's easy to be like, don't just write a bad draft. And I'm like,
I don't know how to
I
do
hate doing that.
that.
That
I've
like
gotten,
constantly over editing like while
yes,
you're trying to draft, like you don't get anywhere. Like
yeah,
I feel like I've been getting better at that where I will just leave a chapter unfinished. I will leave sentences literally like trailing off. I will write fill in the blank parentheses, figure this out, and like that is the only way to keep that forward momentum. And I'd say the other trap I see a lot of like aspiring authors fall into is that like almost over planning, like to the sense of like, oh, what's the best way to revise a book? And they spend a lot of time researching how to do it instead of just like reading through their
jumping
stuff
in.
and doing it because
Yeah.
because it's so intimidating to go through it that we feel like we have to like perfect our plan before we do anything.
There's a
And
lot
then
of
you
pressure to
just get stuck.
not do it wrong. You know what I mean?
Yes. I had that thought of like I'm not doing it right for like years of writing and trying to publish and all of this and I was like I'm not doing it right. And then I was like what is right? Like
Yeah.
there's no like right way to do this.
I was telling Jake, I was like, okay, just so you know, like I got my first official paycheck from Barnes and Noble yesterday. It was like $180. I was like, this is amazing. This is amazing. And I told Jake, I said, well, we're not living off that anytime soon. But according to my research, by the time you're retiring, we'll be able to live off of what I'm selling off my books because I'll have written enough books to have created a backlog that like I'm selling a little bit of something every month and we're able to live off that. So I think like wanting we all want to be J.K. Rowling and have that
Mhm.
seemingly overnight success of, billions of pounds of money. Um, but when you slow down her story, you're like, oh, actually, she spent 15 years or whatever,
Yeah. Yes.
eating ramen noodles and writing
Yes.
scraps of stories on napkins. Um, and we all go um, through that. And like, I feel like that for me, that's the trap is like comparing my current chapter to somebody's finished book, right? Comparing
Totally.
my
Yes.
draft, like you said, comparing my draft to somebody's finished book. And like I'm editing book 2 right now. I'm going through and editing things. And one of my comments to myself was grilled cheese because the lines were just so cheesy. Like so like I'm like, this needs to be on like, I don't know, a soap opera or something because they're just throw them into Spanish, it'll be perfect. Like they're so bad. But number one, I like made myself laugh because I was like, oh, poof. But it's also like teenagers trying to be romantic with each other. So there's a level of cheese that's kind of necessary. But
I'm
anyway, so I
already
think that there's
excited.
But I think that there's also like, like you said, I think that's the biggest trap is just us comparing our journeys to each other or even our
True.
stories to each other. Like, comparing, I was like, I have a whole wall of, I'm sure you've seen it, my whole wall of sticky notes with all of my books planned out. But that's because the story I'm writing is a 5-part series and it's super complex. And I have to keep track of all these different things because I keep laying these little clues and I got to make sure I remember to do something with them later. And,
Yeah.
but then I look at like other things that I've written that, like I wrote a little short story and I was like, oh, this is like, I don't have to do any of that. Like I just sat down and I
Hmm.
was like, I don't even, what am I doing? Like, what is this?
You're like, I'm done. That's
I
it.
don't even have a sticky note. What is this? And so I think even just trying to compare our stories to each other is not going to be helpful. Like it's one thing to look at another writer's story and be like, that's a really fun idea. What if it went this way and like make it your
Hmm.
own? And it's another thing to look at it and be like, oh, why can't I do it that way? What?
Um, we, um,
You might have watched all of the show. It might just be over.
I know, but we saw one that we didn't watch and we clicked it. Jenny accidentally hit resume, and then we did one that we already did.
Okay, well, I'm doing this right now, so either figure it out or just be done with TV and go, maybe go see if you guys can have some otter pops or something. We're gonna go to the word camp out here in a little bit. Okay.
Okay. I'm like, oh, love that when it's the TV questions, like, it paused and I'm like, sounds
Well,
familiar.
we had to put codes on all of our TV stuff so that there's like the kids can't just turn on the TV because we had
Yeah.
problems with certain kids coming down, putting it all the way like on mute and just sitting there
Mhm.
watching the TV at 2 o'clock in the morning. Like, girl, it's not a
You're like
good.
relatable, but no.
I get it, but also this is not a good habit.
But no.
Trust me, you don't want to develop this habit.
Oh, that's so funny.
Okay.
Oh,
So so do you hide any secrets in your books that only a few people will find?
I thought that was such an interesting question, and I've been thinking about it, and I'm like, do I? And I feel like you have this really cool complex story that where you can like drop clues for
Yeah.
future books. And in my experience with like writing a duology, I laid groundwork like plot wise,
Yeah.
but I don't feel like it was like Easter egg type thing. I wouldn't describe it as that, but the only thing that I feel like I do unintentionally is Easter eggs of my personality.
Oh,
Where like I feel like if you if you know me or like if you know my family, they'll be like, "Oh, I've seen Nicole do that," or I've seen Nicole's family do that, or
yeah.
like when my siblings and my family when they read my books, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you mentioned this," like
Yeah.
it's just funny. Like there's like an example is in A Tangle of Dreams, Milo has a backpack that he like carries everywhere with him that has
Yeah.
like all kinds of random stuff in it. My brother did that in high
Oh,
school. Like he carried
that's
this
so
like
cute.
random backpack
His
where
Mary
he'd like
Poppins
pull it
bag.
out. Yeah, and you'd be like, "Why do you have that?" And he'd be like, "I don't know. Like, what if we need it?" So if you like know him and you know me, then you'd be like, "Oh, I know where that's coming from." But and a lot of them are like unintentional. Like I feel like Voted Most Likely is like littered with stuff like that, where I'm like, "Oh, I didn't like mean to do that," but that's just
This was part of my high
what
school
happens when you
experience and
write.
it bled into the story.
Yes, I'm like,
Yeah.
because it's like I actually haven't written any character like based off of anyone in particular. I've never
Yeah.
done that so far where I've been like, oh, this is someone in my life and I'm putting them into the book. Like I've never done that. So it's just this weird layering process where like it's me, it's everyone I know, and they're like wrapped up and it's just
Are you
like
seeing
all
yourself in
on
the
the
book?
page.
That's okay. I'm in there too.
And yeah, I'm like, it's very confusing. It's very confusing. But other than that, like I'm not like this master chess player that has all these cool. I mean, I wish I was
Not
Taylor
Taylor
Swift
Swift.
and like thought ahead and did all this cool stuff, but I think it's because I'm not a plotter, like in any
That
way.
makes
I'm
sense.
not. So I don't have that cool like foresight or I'm like, what's happening every time I sit down to write. So if
My
they're in there, I'm amazed.
You're like, woohoo! High five me.
I did it. Yeah.
I
Well,
have
like
this
my
funny-
brain will
Go ahead.
sometimes be ahead of me, like
Oh, yeah.
plot wise, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's so cool how I
Yes.
like connected that, but I didn't even see that yet. Like I didn't get it, you know." But again,
I have
that's
that
just
happen
plot.
where I'll be like, "Oh, it would be so cool if I put this in this book in like this chapter," and then I'll go in there and it's there already, and I'm like, "Oh, I guess
Yes.
I did. Good job, me."
And it's like, oh, that's what I was trying to do. I'm like, I don't understand how I can be ahead of myself. It's all
Yeah.
me. Like, why? How is this happening?
I feel like that's one of the main reasons I, for the longest time, described my writing process of like, this isn't actually my story. I'm just the archaeologist unlocking it, because I don't feel like I'm actually creating it. I just feel like I'm finding all the pieces and this is how they fit together. And, oh, look, it's a dinosaur, like, because
Yes.
there's so many times where I'm ahead of myself. And so I'm like, I can't be the one creating this because I don't remember doing that.
Yes, it is. I love your description of that because that's how I feel. That's how I really felt with a lot of the stuff with my duology. Like by the time I finished A Memory Made Real, I was like, that's what I was doing the whole time. I was like,
Go
didn't see
figure.
that coming, because I wasn't like, I didn't have both books plotted out before I
Yeah.
released the first one, which seems insane now that I like think about it. But I guess trusted that I'd be able to do it again. But
And I was like, I can't even talk about getting book 1 published until I have book 5 at least plotted out. I gotta have it plotted.
Well, you amaze me with your plotting skills. I like wish so badly I could plot, but my brain like it turns off every time. Oh shoot, I have someone. Hang on. Anyway, I don't remember what we were saying.
Plotting.
Oh, how I wish I could. That's the end of that.
Which is funny because I had that experience where I've always been kind of a planner, just my nature. And so when I started like plotting this specific story, I knew I was going to plot it but when I was in book 3, that was kind of where I was like, I'm going to start rewriting. I haven't written anything in a long time. I think by that point I had
Oh, I'm so sorry. Hang on. I feel so lame. I'm like, what's up? She's like, see above text. Like she had sent me a text already, like describing the situation. I'm like, oh,
sorry.
Like, did not see that. Anyway, sorry.
No,
mom life as I'm trying to do this.
Oh, well, I mean, isn't that, I did a video the other day where I just like recorded like an hour of editing. And in between, like one of my kids comes up to the camera and like I'm changing a bum and I'm getting lunch and like stand up and sit down, stand up, sit down. I'm like,
yes,
but this looks like
that's how it is. Okay, what were you saying? You were saying something about plotting.
Yeah, so with I had plotted the books to a degree, like I kind of had an idea of what happened in different ones. And I had a bunch of babies and I kind of just like stopped writing for the longest time because I was just trying to survive. And then I'd had Edmund, so he's my third kid. I'd had him by that point, and I was kind of starting to feel that like, hey, you should like pick this back up again. And I was like, okay. And so I was like, well, let me just reread everything I've written because it's been years since I've looked at any of it. So I reread book 1 and 2. What do you mean running out of time? I better not be running out.
What? Oh, I see it. We have less than 10 minutes.
Oh no. Okay. But basically, oh yeah, there it is. Basically I was like, well, let me just write book 3 and see what happens. Like I had read the first 2. I kind of had started book 3 and my brain was just not in a place of plotting. So I was like, let's just pants it and see what happens because I've never done it that way. And it's bananas. I'm like, I am obviously not like the amount of editing I'm gonna have to do to book 3 is intense.
Oh,
I was just like, whatever, let's see what happens. And it's going to be.
it is funny because that type of drafting, which is how I draft, is, I guess, how I draft or plot in a really elaborate process of like, it's a book. Does that make sense? Like, I can't like plot it out without knowing, like, that's how I figure out the whole story, which is why I think I like that revising part because it's like how you feel coming to draft with a plotted book. Does that make sense?
That
like
makes
I'm
sense.
at that point where I'm like, okay, I have this material. I know where I want to go now. Not this, not this. Yes to this, where before I'm just like, what are we doing today? Like, where are we going? I don't
Where
know.
to go?
Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna start. You're gonna start walking. Yeah, you start talking.
Let's
Tell me where
see.
you're gonna go. And
Yep.
honestly, my favorite scenes, well, I guess all my books have come from that way, but like my favorite scenes have totally surprised me like that, where like I started and then it's just like, there it comes. Like I get that
Yep.
inspiration. And it's like I only get those ideas truly when I'm in the process of writing.
Yeah.
But I mean, sometimes when I'm like listening to music or driving, like I'll have ideas. It's not
Yeah.
like I don't plan ahead at all, but
Yeah,
you
you'll
know,
have
how
like
they connect, we never know.
yeah. I have mine tends to be a lot of um like I'll have like, okay, we're at point A and we need to get to point B and then that'll get us to point C. But I'm not
Hmm.
exactly sure how we get from point A to point B. And that's kind of what I find in the writing of like, oh, okay, that's where we're going. And actually we don't need point B at all. We can just jump straight to
Yes.
point B and or whatever. But I've also with book 5, I experienced something that I had never had before where I always write chronologically. I just start at the beginning of the
Hmm.
book and I write through the book to the end and then go through and edit or whatever. And book 5 was the first time where I just would have like random scenes jump out that I had not like I knew where they fit in the book, but I hadn't written to them yet. But it was so powerful that I was like, I just need to write this right now.
You've never done that before, where you've
Book
written a
5 was
scene
the
out of
first
order?
one where I had that.
Wow. Yeah.
Usually it was kind of just like as I was going. So
Yeah. I typically write in order too, especially because I'm telling myself a story. But with
yeah,
each of my books, I have had scenes that like really jump out to me, and I just write it and then have it sitting there, hoping that I can fit it in somewhere. I'm like,
yeah.
hope this fits somewhere. And so far, they've always
Fingers
made it into the
crossed.
book. Yeah, but actually, this current book that I'm working on, I have done nothing but write out of order, and it
Oh
is
wow.
driving me crazy. It's terrible. Like I mean, have not figured out the exact like flow of the story yet. So I'm just writing in these chunks that then give me the information I need to go back. So I'm like piecing back. It's like reverse engineering right now. And I'm like, oh, like it's weird. It's been different than my other 3 books. And I do not know what to make of it, but I'm trying to let it be what
Trust
it
the
wants to
process.
be.
Trust the
Yes, trust the
process.
process.
So, if you what one thing would you give up to become a better writer?
I think I already gave that up, and that was caffeine.
Good.
No, I was like, and not, hey, I'm all about caffeine if it works for you, but
Yeah.
caffeine makes my brain turn into like an absolute circus. So
Yeah.
like I, struggle with anxiety and it makes my brain go like, whoo, like it gets really crazy. But I didn't like know that at the time.
Yeah.
And so it works out well for me. Like I wrote voted most likely in this like absolute
Caffeine
like
haze.
spiral of caffeine and like candy and no sleep, and it was fantastic. I love that book, and that was the easiest drafting process I've ever had. So sometimes I'm like, that worked out pretty well. I could just do that again. But
Just
it
take it in
also
doses.
like
It'll
was,
be fine.
I know. I'm like, oh, we'll work out fine. But like, then I also like for, my emotional and like physical and mental health just felt terrible. So I
Yeah.
feel like I truly had to learn, and I'm still learning how to like prioritize like getting sleep, because as a mom, it's so hard to find the time to write. So I used to write at night all the time.
Yeah.
And now, and I would, because I would, stay up late and like drink another soda, and then I wouldn't be tired. And anyway, it all spiraled out of control. So I parted ways with my beloved Dr. Pepper, and sometimes I still miss Nicole that would drink the Dr. Pepper. She was highly productive, but she was also kind of a basket case. So.
I cry a lot, but I am so productive.
It's the truth. And so now I feel like I'm still actually navigating that this year, is like learning how to have writing habits in like a healthy way. And
Yeah.
I'm getting a lot less done. And so that's frustrating for me, but I'm also like healthier and happier. So I'm like, that's good. But I'm like, how do I write books? So I'm still
Yeah.
figuring that out, and that's tough. But
It's hard to find that balance between between the two. I kind of was similar. Like I still will out mine is like, okay, we had a kid up throwing up all night, but I still have to be a human being today. We're gonna use the caffeine crutch, but it's not a
Oh
daily.
yeah. Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like
Oh yeah.
it went
No,
from
and
like
I
I
still have
need
it.
this to like, okay, I need it today, but tomorrow we're not using this, you know, like
And I still have caffeine like every once in a while when I'm like mainly when I have like migraines that are killing me, you know,
yeah.
but like it was to the point where I was like, "Oh my gosh, I'm having so much throughout the day and I'm still so tired." And then I
Yeah.
was like, "This isn't working." Like like something's wrong here. Something's not adding up.
Yeah.
So this isn't meant to be anti-caffeine
No,
or
yeah.
anything. But that was like one thing like as I'm writing, I have to figure out like what once was working no longer is, you
Yeah.
know, and like how do I keep going? And you're always trying to adapt and figure out like how to stay
Well,
healthy and
and
take
you
care of
want to go for the
yourself.
long game, right? Because like the
Totally.
caffeine candy craze is great for a book, but
It
it's
was
not
great.
sustainable if you want to make writing like a permanent part of your life,
Totally.
you know?
Yes. Cause I like drafted voted most likely, seriously, in like the most insane whirlwind. Like it was so fast. And then afterward it was like, whoa, like what just happened?
Yeah.
You know, and then I was like
Like
so
a blur.
slammed and I'm like, I feel like death now, you know, and I'm like, I wonder why.
I
So,
can't imagine why. So we're
I
actually
know
gonna
it's
skip a
very
question and
confusing.
we're gonna end with this last one because we have 2 minutes left. But if you were to write a spin-off about a side character, which would you pick?
That's so easy. That would for sure be Milo.
Yes.
I want him to have his own book so bad.
You should do a little novella. Just like it doesn't
I
have to be a whole
know.
book, but just like a little novella of like what's Milo off doing during the rest of like what's he like him packing his backpack, you know, like oh this
I know.
you know,
He's
like
so funny. I just love him so much. I loved him in A Tangle of Dreams. And then I was so excited for A Memory Made Real that we had so much more of him. Like he was more present, he was way more part of the action.
oh yeah.
And he was so delightful to write. And I really wanted to give him his own point of view, but I was like, that is unnecessary. Like I was like, I
That's just
do
I
not
wanted.
need to, but I want to. And so I like really tried to figure that out for a while. I was like, how would I make this work? But I was like, this feels unnecessary. And it was bothering me that it wouldn't like line up the same with like A Tangle of Dreams, you
Yeah.
know, since there's only 2 books. It already bothered me that I didn't have the chapters back to back, like, you know, Gemma,
Yeah.
Ollie, Gemma, Ollie. Then I had to change it in the second book. I was like, oh, it's too much for me. I can't keep changing
I
all
can't
of
do
this, you
this.
know.
Well,
But he
it's
would for
telling
sure
me
get a spinoff.
yes. If you ever write the Milo novella, I'm here for it. I will buy it.
I'll send it your
100%.
way.
I mean, I've got less than a minute, so I'm thinking we'll close up, but
All
'cause I don't
right.
want to get cut off. That's just rude.
Yes.
But thanks so much for doing this. I really appreciate
Yeah,
it.
of course. It's
It
so
was
fun.
it's fun to like I was like, "Oh, why not just do YouTube too?" Like, yeah, why not? No,
You
it'll be fine.
you amaze me. You are crushing all your marketing and
I don't know.
you're doing awesome. I mean, I like bow out every 5 minutes. So I say well
Cool
done.
about today. Yep. So thanks so
You're doing
much. I
awesome.
really appreciate this.